In the spring of 1887, when the wind still carried winter's bite across the plains of Missouri, Clara Whitmore sat alone at a narrow kitchen table, rereading a single newspaper page until the ink began to blur. She was 24, widowed for nearly a year, and already exhausted by the quiet cruelty of survival. Teaching paid little, sympathy paid nothing, and a woman alone in the East was expected to fade politely into dependency. Clara had no intention of doing either. The advertisement was small, tucked between farm equipment listings and notices for missing cattle. Ranch owner in Arizona Territory seeks respectable woman for marriage. Honest living, steady work, and land of one's own. Replies answered with sincerity. No flowery promises. No grand claims. Just facts. Mail-order marriages were whispered about in respectable circles, spoken of as desperate arrangements for desperate people. But Clara knew better. She taught history. She understood why such letters existed. The West needed women. Women needed opportunity. Survival often came disguised as scandal. She folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket. That night, Clara wrote by lamplight, her handwriting precise, her words restrained. She spoke of her teaching, her loss, her willingness to work, and her belief that marriage should be built on honesty, not illusion. She did not embellish her beauty or her youth. She simply asked for truth in return. Weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived bearing a postmark from the Arizona Territory. The paper smelled faintly of dust and smoke. The man's name was Taza. His reply was shorter than hers but striking in its clarity. He owned a modest horse ranch near a growing frontier town. He had lost family to sickness and war. He valued quiet, labor, and loyalty. He made no promises of wealth-only partnership. One line stood out, written without apology. There are rumors about me. I will answer any question you ask. Clara read that sentence again and again. Their correspondence stretched over months. With every exchange, Clara learned more not just about the ranch or the land, but about the man behind the ink. Taza wrote plainly, sometimes awkwardly, but always with respect. He asked her opinions. He thanked her for her thoughts. He never once told her what she should be. When he finally proposed by letter, of course it was done without pressure. If you choose to come, he wrote, you will be my wife in truth, not possession. If you choose not to, I will wish you peace. By summer's end, Clara sold what little she owned, packed 2 dresses, her books, and her teaching certificates, and boarded a westbound train. The journey itself felt like crossing into another life. The air grew drier. The sky widened. Towns thinned into dots on the map. Clara watched families, soldiers, miners, and dreamers climb on and off the train, all chasing something they could not find where they came from. When she finally arrived at the station near Taza's ranch, the platform was quiet. A single man waited beside a chestnut horse. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, dressed simply. His hair was tied back neatly, his expression calm but guarded. When their eyes met, Clara felt an unexpected steadiness settle over her. You must be Clara, he said. His voice was low, respectful. Yes, she replied. And you are Taza. He nodded and took her single trunk without comment, lifting it as though it weighed nothing. There was no awkward attempt at charm, no forced familiarity. Just space. Just courtesy. As they rode toward the ranch, Clara noticed how the land seemed to stretch endlessly, harsh, beautiful, unforgiving. It made sense now why survival here required honesty more than romance. The ranch itself was modest but well kept. Horses grazed in fenced pastures. The house was sturdy, sun-worn, and clearly cared for. Nothing about the place spoke of neglect or deception. That evening, as the sun sank red behind the hills, Taza spoke the words Clara knew would come. "Before we marry," he said, "you should hear what the town says about me." She turned to face him, her spine straight. "I've heard whispers already," she answered. "I came anyway." For the first time since she met him, something like relief crossed his face, and in that moment, before vows, before promises, before the future unfolded, Clara understood something important. The real journey had not been the train or the miles. It had been the courage to choose truth over fear, and the frontier, she sensed, was about to learn the same lesson. The morning after Clara arrived, the small frontier town seemed to lean in and watch her. Word traveled faster than the Arizona wind, as it always did in settlements strung along dusty trails. By breakfast, neighbors were whispering, tipping their hats too slowly, and casting sideways glances toward the ranch where she and Taza now lived. The rumor that Taza was infertile had preceded her like a shadow clinging to his reputation. Some said he'd been sick as a boy, others claimed bad blood ran in his family, and a few even suggested his previous fiancée had left him out of frustration. Clara listened quietly, her hands folded over her teacup, the firelight catching the edge of her resolve. She had come west to learn, to survive, and to make a life on her own terms. She would not let the gossip dictate her choices. Still, she needed truth, and Taza understood that evening. As the sky burned gold over the mesas, Clara asked him directly, sitting on the porch of the modest ranch house, "Are the things they say about you true?" Taza paused, eyes on the horizon where the cacti cast long shadows. His voice was quiet but steady. "There is some truth in the stories," he admitted. "I was sick once, and some doctors said I would never have children. Others said it was a lie or a mistake. People believe what they want, but I cannot give what I do not have, and I will not pretend." Clara nodded. His honesty did not disappoint. It reassured her. On the frontier, honesty was more valuable than wealth, more protective than walls. She realized that Taza's character, his respect, his integrity was worth far more than the rumor's shadow. He looked at her with a faint smile. "I cannot promise what the town expects. I can promise only what I know, that I will treat you with respect and you will never want for honesty." Clara's lips curved into a small smile. It was a rare thing, this feeling of being seen and heard. Out here, so far from the schools and salons she had known in Missouri, she could feel herself learning the first of the West's many lessons. Trust is a kind of survival skill. The following days were filled with the rhythms of ranch life. Clara learned to groom the horses, feed the livestock, and mend fences. Taza showed her how to track water holes and predict storms from the clouds. Each lesson came with stories, tales of his people, the ways the land had been cared for long before settlers arrived, and the hard-won respect between man and nature died as Clara worked. The whispers of the town continued, but they grew quieter as neighbors saw her ride beside Taza, steady and unafraid. Some even began to notice her teaching local children from the back of the ranch. Her school books laid across a worn table outside in the shade. One afternoon, a neighbor dared to speak the words aloud, "I hear she's," sticking with him even with all those stories. Taza, who had been repairing a fence post nearby, straightened and replied simply, "She sees the truth. That is all that matters." It was a statement that carried more weight than Clara realized at the time. On the frontier, truth and reputation often collided, and most people let rumor win. But here, between the woman who chose to ride west and the man who chose honesty, a fragile trust was being forged. By the week's end, Clara understood that she had made a rare and valuable choice. She could have been swayed by fear. She could have returned east, swallowed the gossip, and sought a safer path. Instead, she embraced the uncertainty, knowing that courage and respect would shape the life ahead. That night, Under a sky so vast it seemed to stretch forever, Taza spoke again. Softer this time. I know the world will question us. I know the town will judge. But with you, Clara, I feel something they cannot touch. I promise you, whatever comes, we face it together. Clara felt warmth that had little to do with the Arizona sun. Here, on the edge of the frontier, amid whispers and warnings, she realized something vital. Love and partnership could thrive even where fear and prejudice seemed strongest. And in that quiet moment, she made another promise to herself. She would not just survive the frontier, she would teach it, learn from it, and transform it, one small step at a time. The stage was set. The whispers of the town would test them. The land would challenge them. But Clara and Taza had made the first, most important choice. They had chosen truth, courage, and each other. The sun had finally dipped behind the jagged horizon, painting the Arizona mesas in deep amber and violet. The ranch, quiet now except for the occasional whinny of a horse or the creak of a gate swinging in the evening breeze, seemed almost suspended in time. For Clara, the day had been long filled with chores she had never imagined herself doing, from mending fences to checking the water troughs, but it had also been illuminating. She was learning, bit by bit, the rhythm of the land and the life it demanded. That evening, Taza approached her on the porch, his expression calm but serious. Clara felt a flutter of nervousness, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty that was entirely new to her. This was the night she would officially begin life as his wife, and though the town had its opinions, she knew the most important judgment belonged only to them. Clara, he said, his voice low and even, tonight is ours. Whatever the future holds, I want you to know you are safe with me. Safety. It was a simple word, but in the harsh expanse of the frontier, it carried a weight far heavier than gold. Clara met his gaze and felt the sincerity there, unmasked and unwavering. She nodded. I trust you, Taza, she replied. What followed was not a display of grand gestures or dramatic passion, but a quiet, mutual understanding of boundaries, respect, and trust. They spoke honestly about their hopes, fears, and the rumors that had followed Taza like a shadow. Clara shared the unease she had felt stepping into a land so foreign, leaving behind everything familiar. And Taza listened. He spoke too of the mistakes of the past, of the prejudice he had endured, and of the careful hope he held for a family, even if the world doubted it. Together they found common ground, the kind that could not be swayed by gossip, medical ignorance, or societal expectation. As the night deepened, Clara realized that the true intimacy of their marriage was not physical alone. It was in the quiet exchange of trust, in the reassurance of safety, and in the courage to face an uncertain future together. The ranch walls, sturdy and time-worn, felt less like a house and more like a sanctuary, a place where respect and understanding had room to grow. The next morning, Clara awoke to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of Taza working outside, repairing a fence post. There was no grand display of devotion, no dramatic declarations, only the steady rhythm of life and labor that defined the frontier. And yet, in its simplicity, there was an education of a different sort. Survival on the plains depended as much on mutual respect and partnership as it did on skill or strength. Over the following days, Clara began to see just how intertwined life and labor could be in the West. She learned to saddle horses, to tend the livestock, and to read the signs of weather in the shifting clouds. Each lesson carried with it a respect for Taza's knowledge he had inherited from his people and honed through experience. She also noticed how the town's whispers slowly began to lose their sting. Observers saw not only a woman who had braved the journey west, but a partnership founded on integrity and honesty, qualities far more rare than gossip. By the end of the week, Clara reflected on what the first night had truly taught her. It had been an education in trust, courage, and choice. She understood that love on the frontier was not born from romance alone, but from shared responsibility, honesty, and the willingness to stand together against the judgment and uncertainties of the world. And as the stars sparkled over the desert, vast and unending, Clara felt a profound sense of hope. The frontier was a place of danger and challenge, yes, but also of opportunity. Here, with Taza, she would build a life rooted in truth, respect, and mutual support, and that, she realized, was the most valuable lesson of all. In that quiet desert night, two people, bound not just by marriage but by understanding and courage, took the first real step into a shared life, one that would weather whispers, storms, and the harshness of the West, and yet, in time, flourish. The days stretched long under the relentless Arizona sun, and the small town near Taza's ranch could not look away. Clara had arrived as a stranger, a young Eastern woman stepping boldly into a world where gossip traveled faster than the wind. And now, as she worked beside Taza, learning the rhythms of ranch life, the whispers persisted, but with a subtle shift. At first, the townspeople were skeptical. They watched her ride across the pastures, her skirts tucked neatly, her hands firm on the reins. They noted how she fed the livestock, how she swept the porch, and how she carried herself with quiet determination. They murmured behind hands, questioning whether she could truly endure this life, whether she would bend to the hardships of the frontier or break under them. Clara, of course, heard the rumors, but she paid them little mind. Her focus was on learning. She asked Taza questions, watched the way he coaxed the horses, mended fences, and anticipated storms. She absorbed everything with a mixture of respect and curiosity. In turn, Taza encouraged her, gently correcting her mistakes, praising her persistence, and sharing knowledge that had been handed down through generations of his people. One afternoon, a group of local children wandered onto the ranch, drawn by curiosity about the newcomer. Clara seized the opportunity. She pulled out her worn school books and began to teach them right there under the shade of the mesquite trees. The children listened intently, and some of the older townsfolk watched from a distance, surprised by the sight of a woman educating the young in the middle of the wilderness. The impact was subtle but undeniable. Neighbors began to see Clara not just as a bride, but as a teacher, a helper, and a partner who contributed to the community. Even those who had doubted Taza's ability to maintain a family began to notice the harmony between the two. They saw how he respected her knowledge, valued her input, and treated her with patience and dignity. Yet despite the growing respect, judgment lingered. On market days, shopkeepers would whisper about the Eastern bride and the infertile rancher, shaking their heads with skepticism. A few more daring souls even voiced their concerns directly. "Do you really think this marriage will last?" one neighbor asked. Taza's response was measured but firm. "We are building something here that cannot be seen in a day or judged by rumors. She sees the truth, and that is all that matters." Clara felt a swell of gratitude for his words. The frontier had its prejudices, but together they were learning to navigate them. Every fence mended, every lesson learned, and every child taught became a quiet defiance of expectation. Their partnership was proof that respect, honesty, and perseverance could outweigh the weight of gossip. As weeks turned into months, even the harshest critics could not deny the couple's dedication. The ranch flourished. Horses grew healthy and strong. Crops began to take root, and Clara's school drew more students each week, bridging the gap between the settlers and Taza's cultural knowledge. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Taza stood beside Clara, watching the town below settle for the night. "They are learning slowly," he said, his voice carrying a hint of pride. "Not just about us, but about what is possible when people act with truth instead of fear." Clara nodded, realizing that their story was bigger than them. It was about teaching the frontier to respect courage and honesty, about challenging prejudice, and about showing that love and partnership could thrive even in a harsh, judgmental land. The whispers continued, but they were softer now. The town had begun to understand that real strength on the frontier and in life came not from rumor, but from trust, hard work, and mutual respect. And in that quiet triumph, Clara and Taza found a sense of accomplishment that no gossip could tarnish. The stage was set for the next chapter, one that would challenge the town's beliefs even further and reveal a truth that would astonish the entire frontier. Spring had settled over the Arizona plains, and with it came signs of life and renewal. The ranch was thriving. Horses grazed in healthy pastures. Fences were sturdy, and the small orchard Clara had planted showed the first green shoots of new growth. Clara herself felt a quiet confidence settle over her, a sense that she had finally found her place in this wild, sun-drenched land. Yet even as the couple worked side by side, the shadow of the town's skepticism lingered. Rumors of Taza's supposed infertility had not fully disappeared. Some townsfolk still whispered about the impossibility of their union producing a child, dismissing the couple's successes as trivial or coincidental. Clara, however, had stopped listening to gossip long ago. She was focused on the tangible, the sweat of labor, the lessons she was imparting to the children, the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent. Then, one morning, Clara felt an unfamiliar sensation, a flutter in her chest that she could not explain. At first, she dismissed it, attributing it to exhaustion from rising before dawn to milk the horses and tend the garden. But as days passed, the feeling grew more pronounced. Finally, she realized the truth. She was expecting a child. The news struck her with a mix of awe and disbelief. She remembered the town's words, the rumors surrounding Taza, and the doubts she herself had once harbored before leaving Missouri. Yet here she was, standing in the middle of the frontier, holding evidence that truth often defied expectation. When she shared the news with Taza, he was quiet for a long moment, staring across the fields as if measuring the reality of this miracle. Then a broad, incredulous smile broke across his face. "The rumors were wrong," he said softly. "We have been right all along. Trust, patience, and care will always matter more than idle talk." To confirm, they invited a visiting doctor from the nearest town, a man skeptical but thorough. After examination and careful discussion, he declared what Clara and Taza already knew. The previous diagnosis of Taza's infertility had been wrong, likely a result of misdiagnosis, poor medical knowledge, and perhaps even cultural misunderstandings. Science had failed them, but life had not. When the news reached the town, it caused a quiet uproar. Many townspeople were shocked, some embarrassed by their earlier judgments. The whispers of doubt were replaced by astonishment, and gradually a sense of admiration. People began to understand that their assumptions rooted in prejudice, ignorance, and fear had been challenged by patience, honesty, and partnership. Clara, ever the teacher, seized the opportunity to turn the moment into an educational lesson. She spoke to the town's children, explaining how medical knowledge in the East was limited, how prejudice could cloud judgment, and how the frontier demanded both courage and open-mindedness. She emphasized that life on the plains required observation, learning, and respect for truth, qualities that went far beyond rumor or fear. Taza, for his part, continued his quiet strength. He never gloated. Instead, he let the proof of their partnership, Clara's pregnancy, the thriving ranch, and the children she was teaching speak for itself. In doing so, he set an example of resilience and integrity that few could ignore. By the time Clara's child was born months later, the entire valley had witnessed a transformation. The couple's love, trust, And perseverance had not only defied the town's gossip, but had redefined the community's understanding of truth, courage, and partnership. The frontier had learned that some of the most important victories were not won with guns or gold, but with honesty, patience, and respect for one another. And so, the infertile rancher and the brave mail order bride became more than a story of love. They became a living lesson for the entire frontier. That life often surprises those willing to believe in trust over rumor. And that hope, when nurtured with care and integrity, can flourish even in the harshest of lands. The morning sun rose over the Arizona plains, casting golden light across the Taza Ranch, where the once quiet valley now hummed with life. Clara cradled her newborn daughter in her arms, feeling the tiny heartbeat that marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for their family, but for the entire community. The child's arrival had transformed whispers into wonder and skepticism into respect. The frontier had learned a profound lesson. Truth and courage often triumph over rumor and fear. The ranch itself had never looked more alive. Horses grazed contentedly in green pastures. Fences were newly mended, and the orchard Clara had planted now bore small blossoms, promising fruit for seasons to come. But the most vibrant growth was not in the land, it was in the hearts of those who witnessed this story unfold. The townspeople, who once doubted Taza and Clara, had begun to understand the value of partnership built on honesty and mutual respect. Clara returned to her teaching with renewed purpose. What had begun as informal lessons under the shade of mesquite trees had grown into a small schoolhouse at the edge of the ranch. Children from neighboring homesteads and Apache families alike gathered there, learning reading, arithmetic, and the stories of the land they called home. Clara encouraged curiosity and respect, blending frontier survival skills with knowledge she had carried from Missouri. Her teachings became a bridge between cultures, demonstrating that education and cooperation could thrive even in a harsh, unforgiving environment. Taza, too, embraced the new chapter of their lives. He worked alongside Clara, tending the ranch, mentoring young men in horsemanship and teaching the community about the land's wisdom. He shared the practical knowledge of his ancestors, the techniques of horse care, the reading of clouds to predict storms, and the subtle understanding of water sources in arid terrain. Through him, the townspeople began to see that survival was not just a matter of labor, but of observation, patience, and respect for what one could not immediately control. Life was not without its challenges. The desert could be merciless, and the couple faced droughts, storms, and the occasional threat of theft or illness. Yet every challenge became a lesson in resilience. Clara and Taza learned to lean on each other, combining their strengths, and showing the valley that love on the frontier was not fragile. It was forged in the same soil as the land itself. Months turned into years. The child, named Sophia, grew under the open skies, curious, confident, and loved. She roamed the ranch alongside the horses, learned letters from Clara, and absorbed the wisdom of Taza. She became a living symbol of possibility, proving that the impossible, overcoming prejudice, defying rumors, and creating a thriving family against the odds, could be achieved with trust, courage, and unity. The town that once whispered behind hands now nodded respectfully when passing the couple. Travelers and new settlers heard the story of the mail-order bride and the infertile rancher who had defied expectation. Their tale was shared not just as romance, but as a lesson in integrity, education, and partnership, inspiring others to value truth over hearsay and courage over fear. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the mesas in fiery hues, Clara and Taza stood together on the porch, Sophia sleeping peacefully in Clara's arms. The valley stretched before them, wild, beautiful, and full of promise. Taza squeezed Clara's hand gently. "We came here thinking we were alone in the world," he said. But look at what we've built, not just for us, but for everyone." Clara smiled, feeling the warmth of both the sun and their shared life. "We learned the most important lessons together," she replied. "Trust, patience, and respect can survive anything, even the harshest frontier." And in that quiet triumph, under skies that seemed endless and free, the family knew that they had created more than a home. They had created a legacy, a story of hope, education, love, and courage that would endure far longer than any rumor, fear, or shadow cast by the frontier winds. The valley whispered back in approval, and the frontier, once skeptical, now knew that the true strength of a family was built not in wealth or reputation, but in honesty, partnership, and the bravery to embrace the unknown together.